Hi, I'm Dave Gardy for Cybersecurity TV from our studios here near Washington, D.C. for this special presentation, another in the Steel Cloud Compliance Automation Series. Joining me here now is the Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Brian Hajos from Steel Cloud. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about the supply chain security, and that's software supply chain for this case. There's an executive order out, 14028. What does it say regarding the software supply chain?
Wow, that executive order was pretty expansive based on cybersecurity, but did a couple of things. It directed organizations to produce documents. It also delineated what I'll call critical software from non-critical software. You know, from that we have NIST 853 Rev 5, which is the overriding document to almost everything having to do with cybersecurity. Now has a new control section just on supply chain risk and the management of supply chain risk. So all government entities following 853 will now have to take that into their evaluation and their ATO processes.
So how are software bill of materials, or SBOM, and the software supply chain linked?
Boy, there's a lot of, when you look at supply chain, there's a lot of things that are interlinked. CMMC is interlinked. That's part of the security of the supply chain. SBOM is a process in which you're collecting the inventory of components that are used in software. So part of what the secure supply chain directs developers, be they GOTS or COTS developers, those that develop for the government, those that develop commercial products, that they have to both inventory and they have to keep the lineage of all the software components they use, including open source software. So the SBOM, or Software Bill of Materials, is a first step in requiring organizations to inventory and publish those things. So that's one of the things that came out of the President's EO. The other one were development best practices, and there was a document recently produced by CISA, NSA, and ODNI that highlights the best practices for software developers.
Okay, can you define what critical software is for our viewers?
Yeah, it's a little counterintuitive. Critical software has to do with trust. So critical software is defined by the EO and by NIST is not software that's important or software that's mission critical or anything of that nature or costly. It is software that has a trust relationship. So it operates with elevated permissions, like administrative permissions. It manages administrators. It has basically the keys to the castle. And what we're seeing is a split between the requirements for the software that would be deemed as critical versus software that's not critical. And software that's critical would go through a much more intensive supply chain review on how they get updates. And a lot of this came from the SolarWinds hack that most of us know, and that was critical software. It had elevated trust, and it had the ability to hack into Active Directory, which controls access to systems and files and volumes of information.
What can be done to make complying with the executive order easier? Is automation a solution?
Well, part of it is. One is to review the documentations out there. And again, I would direct people back to the CISA, NSA, ODNI document that goes through best practices. Part of best practices, much like CMMC, requires basic cyber hygiene, meaning your systems are hardened. You have two-factor authentication on your volumes and repositories, things of that nature. So there's a lot of places in which automation would be required to comply with those best practices. From our standpoint, basic hygiene on how to harden systems so that so that they're secure is just a fundamental requirement, as it is for any ATO system in the government, as it is for NIST 800-171 or CMMC requirements.
And how can Steel Cloud help?
Well, Steel Cloud, we've spent most of our life in the last dozen years or more automating compliance and automating the implementation and assessment of security controls. So we deal with a lot of organizations today that produce GOT software and COT software, who are contractors to the government, to allow them to harden their environments to the requirements of the STIGs with the least amount of cost and effort possible.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate the time you've taken today to discuss the software supply chain. We've been speaking with Brian Hajos, who's the Chief Operating Officer for Steel Cloud. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm Dave Gardy for the Compliance Automation Series with Steel Cloud from our studios here near Washington, D.C. on Cybersecurity TV. Thanks for watching.